Hello, everyone. My name is Braden Tanner. I'm a graduate student from the University of Oklahoma, Department of Psychology, and today I'm going to be presenting some empirical research about how we could potentially go about leveraging insights from the decision sciences to create better educational interventions about recycled water. So to begin, I'd like you all to imagine that some scientist out there has unlocked the secret to the perfect recycled water intervention. This intervention has it all. It would make it so people aren't disgusted by the idea of recycled water. Everyone would have a perfect knowledge of all the relevant facts, and everyone who understood it would be completely willing to drink recycled water afterwards. But say there was just one problem with this intervention. Every single word of it is in Albanian. You don't speak Albanian, you don't understand Albanian, and nobody that you know is willing to translate this perfect intervention for you or for anyone else. So now a question. If you were exposed to this intervention, would you be more accepting of recycled water after you listened to it? Well, of course, the answer here would be no, right? It doesn't matter how perfect that intervention is or how accurate the information was. If you can't pull what you need out of that intervention, if it's not in a language that you understand, so to speak, it's not going to have any impact on you. And so in this presentation, what I'm going to demonstrate is how on a smaller scale, this principle might be applicable to and might have led to some skepticism about the role of informing in increasing public acceptance of recycled water. And I'll show you the results of a couple of studies that we've done here at the University of Oklahoma that might help us to be better at informing in the future. So the basic motivation for these studies is rooted in the commonly held belief that the more that you know about something, the more likely you are to understand and make a smart decision about that thing. In the sciences, this idea is summed up well in what's known as the knowledge deficit model. This model specifically posits that when it comes to science and scientific innovations, domain-specific knowledge is integral to the public's perception and attitudes about acceptance. And it further asserts that public doubt about such innovations is often attributable to people just being ignorant about key facts about that scientific innovation. And this model has received empirical support across many domains, where domain-specific knowledge has been linked to acceptance of things like stem cell research, innovations in environmental science, and many other things. And so it seems to me that recycled water theoretically should fit very nicely into this framework, right? It's a scientific innovation that people don't usually know much about. Surprisingly to me, however, when I look in the literature about recycled water, I instead find a decent amount of skepticism about that. So here are just a couple of snippets from papers that have been published within the last few years. Notice some of the phrases used here. Clearly, information campaigns alone do not work. The process of building and shaping a positive narrative around recycled water would necessarily include basic information provision, but these activities on their own are unlikely to shift public reaction significantly. My reading is almost like informing is often viewed kind of like a chore that has to be done out of duty in this domain, rather than something that will actually make an impact for people. And beyond this, even those who have had success with educational interventions have typically only reported small shifts in acceptance, which I think in many ways have turned a lot of researchers off to the idea of informing being a key piece of this acceptance puzzle. And so that begs the question, why? Why is it a key piece in other domains, but in this domain, it almost seems like it's an afterthought? Well, as I hinted at earlier, what I would suggest is that the answer might be that there are deficiencies in the way that we are trying to inform people. So here are just a couple of examples of the educational interventions that people have used in the past. There's many more examples that I could show of this, but suffice it to say, the go-to seems to be, in many cases, just presenting people with these walls of text. And not just walls of text, but also walls of text with lots of technical language in them. So for example, if you look at the one on the left, talks about such things as protozoan cysts, colloidal particles, aromatic hydrocarbons, and much, much more. Now, do you think that this sort of information is going to make an impact for the layperson? Well, as a layperson myself, in terms of recycled water expertise, I would assert that the answer to that would almost certainly be no. It doesn't matter how true this information is. It's just not in a language that I personally understand. So why would it make an impact for me? And just to kind of drive this point home, in some of our initial testing of materials, we used some infographics. So again, these text-based information to increase people's acceptance of recycled water. And not only did we find that, that this infographic didn't increase acceptance of recycled water, it didn't even increase accepted knowledge of recycled water. And so kind of one of the take-home messages here is that just because you've given people information does not mean that you've actually informed them, because not all information is created equal. So if not all information is equal, what type of information is likely to actually be impactful? Well, this is where insights from the decision sciences might be able to help. In particular, one idea that's gained some traction over the years is something that we call representative understanding. And the idea behind representative understanding is that a decision maker doesn't need to know everything about a topic to make a good decision about it. But instead, what the decision maker needs is enough key facts that they can integrate those key pieces of information with their own values, beliefs, and emotions. And then beyond those few key pieces of information, additional information usually isn't going to make that much of an impact. And so the idea here is kind of simple. If we can identify the few pieces of key information that are able to speak to people in that language that's going to be able to be integrated with their core selves, those are the types of information that are likely going to make an impact. And so the goal of our research was to do just that, to identify several core areas of knowledge and information that are actually likely to lead to that representative understanding of recycled water, which will actually increase acceptance. And we illustrate this using two things. First, did it actually increase their knowledge about recycled water? And second, did it actually increase their acceptance of recycled water? So to accomplish this, we conducted 2 empirical studies, and these studies were conducted in collaboration with experts in recycled water from OU's Water Center. And specifically with their help, we developed 2 key pieces of materials. The first and most important was an educational video, which was about 5 minutes long, and this video was specifically split into 4 different areas of content that we felt could be impactful for recycled water acceptance. So the first one talked about the need for recycled water. The second one illustrated some core definitions about things like indirect potable reuse, direct potable reuse, and de facto reuse. The third walked through a simplified version of the actual purification process. And the fourth exposed people to the number of locations around the US that already have reuse systems in place. And so in both of these experiments, what we did is participants received either one of these 4 video sections or the full 5-minute video, or a control video that had nothing to do with recycled water, so that we could compare the results to that video. Likewise, the experts also helped us to develop a 39-question true-false knowledge instrument to help us gauge how much people actually learned about recycled water. And then finally, in the second experiment, we also gauged acceptance, and specifically we did that using a 3-item measure. And these items were pulled from various measures that people have used in the past to measure people's acceptance of recycled water. We pulled those out and we validated them to make sure that they were actually statistically desirable. And so in experiment 1, we just gauged objective knowledge of recycled water to make sure that the video and its sections were actually working. So here are the results of that experiment. And what we're looking for here are these different video sections statistically different from the control video. And what we found is that after watching one of these video sections, all of them, with the exception of the first one about the need for recycled water, significantly increased people's knowledge about recycled water. And if you're familiar with effect sizes in statistics, what you'll see is that each of them that worked had what we would consider a large effect size in statistics. Especially the full video, which really increased people's objective knowledge by a lot. In experiment 2, we saw similar results in terms of knowledge, with all of the sections except for the need again, and also purification. That section did not result in significant results, but the other sections led to medium to large sized effects in terms of knowledge gain. So in sum, if you actually want people to learn something about recycled water, concise information about basic definitions and locations are likely to do that job very well. But of course, what matters more is if that knowledge actually bleeds through into increased acceptance. And the answer to that is also yes. Specifically, what we saw here was that in terms of the content areas, the definition section had a significant impact on acceptance, and that resulted in a medium-sized increase in acceptance. And likewise, the full video also resulted in an increase in acceptance, specifically with a large-sized effect. And to put that effect into perspective, if you were just to go out and randomly pull people off of the streets and have them watch this full video, we would expect on average about 1 out of every 2 people would increase in acceptance after they watch this video. And that's impressive for human research. Also, it's worth mentioning here that this video, while all of us who worked on it love it, it was really low production value, produced on a shoestring budget. And so this is really some cool stuff already. And I think there's even more room for growth and for improvement in the future here. So kind of pulling all of this information together, what can we conclude from these studies? First, again, not all information is actually informative. I think there's several different dimensions in these studies that we could say that on. First and most obviously is that the different areas of content in our experiments seems to lead to different levels of knowledge gain. Specifically, again, it was those illustrative definitions and the information about locations that were most impactful in terms of knowledge. Beyond that, though, I think there's also something to say for the difference between walls of text as opposed to visual aids, and also the difference between information presented in technical and complicated language compared to language that is more accessible to a layperson. And simply, throughout all of our pilot studies and other studies, we've consistently found that this visual information through videos worked better than information that was presented in these walls of text. So I think that researchers and experts alike would benefit from sticking with visuals rather than giving lots of text information that we see in a lot of the literature. And secondly, we took a lot of care when we were crafting these videos to avoid technical terms that would not make sense to a layperson, and I think the results speak to themselves in terms of knowledge. And also for all these reasons, I think future researchers would also be served well by including manipulation checks in their research, like the knowledge instrument that we used here, to make sure that those educational interventions are actually educating people instead of just bouncing information off of a brick wall. Secondly, our research also pointed to those illustrated definitions of things like indirect potable reuse and factor reuse as being more consistently impactful than any other areas of information. So in a time crunch, just that simple 1-minute illustration of those core concepts seemed like they could really make a difference in terms of recycled water acceptance and recycled water knowledge. That said, one final implication of this research is that if you aren't in a time crunch, it seems that covering multiple areas of content can have an even greater impact than any one area of content. So consistently across these studies, the full video was outperforming its individual counterparts and resulting in effects that were, again, really impressive for human research. And again, these are just a few areas of content with low production values. So there's so much more that we could talk about here and so much more that could be explored in the future. And so in sum, I hope you can see here that informing people about recycled water is not just something to do out of duty. Informational campaigns have a lot more potential to change attitudes about recycled water than I think that we give them credit for usually. We just need to be more willing to put in the work ourselves to give information to people in a language that they will truly and actually understand. I'd like to quickly thank everyone who's contributed to this project, just a few of which are listed here. And I'd especially like to thank Doctors Dave Sabatini and Jim Chamberlain, whose expertise and connections have consistently made these projects possible. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.